Welcome to Stateside Gooners, an Arsenal FC show, the podcast where American Gooners get together to share insights, rants, and the latest on all things Arsenal. I'm Eric, joined by my co-host Matt, and every week we're here to break down the highs, the heartbreaks, and everything in between as we ride the Arsenal wave from across the pond. Here we dive deep into the nitty-gritty of what's happening on the pitch and beyond. Whether it's those nail-biting match recaps or the tactical decisions we're all debating, we're covering it with the intensity and passion of fans who live and breathe the red and white. From big-name transfer rumors to some of our favorite deep-cut Gooner trivia, we keep it real and relatable. So grab a tea, coffee, or pint, settle in, and join us on Stateside Gooners as we bring a fresh American perspective to our beloved Arsenal. Because win, lose, or draw, this is where our Arsenal family meets. And hey, if you're enjoying the show, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and share it with your fellow Gooners. Your support helps keep this Arsenal conversation going week after week. Let's kick it off.
Okay. So, Matt, you've talked about the need to discuss the differences between these sports league models, debate which is better or which is at least the more preferred model. So I say let's do it. So I want us to go through, I want to give you a little structure to this. We'll do a high level sort of summary of each model, American versus European sports models. We'll talk a little bit about the strengths for each model, going back and forth, the weaknesses of each back and forth. I'll do a quick recap of what we learned, and then let's debate, man. Let's talk about it.
Debate what's better. So sports models in the US and Europe differ a lot, significantly in structure, philosophy, financial priorities. Differences are born out of different cultural values, historical development, and approaches to commercialization and competition. So let's go through a little bit about the American sports model. Closed system. There's no promotion, no relegation. Fixed teams, franchises, although you can buy into leagues. You can get, we've talked a little bit about that. Commercialization. Ooh, this is big. Money is king. Revenue generation through media, sponsorships, merchandising, and of course, ticket sales. They draft people, draft players. Player development is done through scholastic means, high schools, colleges. They do the development. Fan experience. Sports is entertainment. Blending sports with shows. They now have halftime shows. I'm sure everybody's seen some of that here recently.
Very recently.
Contests at halftime. Hey, win your tuition.
Half-court shot.
Take this half-court shot. So yes, lots and lots of that. It's filled with that. Music plays during timeouts. So yes, it's all about the fan
What's
experience.
a timeout? We don't have that in European sports model.
What is a timeout? We'll talk about that, I suppose.
Yeah, in Europe, and to be fair, I've been to Europe, Matt, but I've never lived there. I don't think the amount of time I have there is quite a month. It's less than a month. So for our European listeners, this is just a dumb American saying what he knows. But it's a pyramid structure, right? At least in football. And so promotion and relegation, the leagues are open leagues from that perspective. It's a strong community focus here, and we're going to talk about this. It's less so, and we'll get into that. But there, the club is tied to the community. Player development comes through youth academies and professionalization through the academy, through the club. And even though it's becoming increased in terms of commercialization, it wasn't always that way. There's very expensive transfers, as we know now, even breaking records down into the women's we just talked about, down into the championship, and even some of the lower, League One, League Two, breaking records. And the media deals are huge. And next episode, we're going to talk about not so much media deals, but what drives media deals is attendance and eyes watching. And we're going to talk a little bit about that specifically next time. But what are the strengths of the American sports model?
Oh, I'm glad you asked. Number one with a bullet is the commercialization and revenue generation. Sports leagues, American sports leagues excel at maximizing revenue streams, broadcast rights, sponsorships, merchandise, ticket sales. This ensures that leagues like the NFL and the NBA consistently rank most profitable in the world. Now, I left out MLB. We'll talk about that in a second. Baseball also has a lot of teams that consistently rank among the most profitable. It's a closed system. Salary caps exist in the NFL, and there's a pseudo one that exists in the NBA. There really isn't one in the MLB. But salary caps allow for that competitive financial balance, making it possible for those smaller market teams to compete with larger ones. And they don't get overpowered by the wealthier franchises.
That's Kansas City making it to the Super Bowl, by the way.
Correct. But the other example is the Pittsburgh Pirates in the MLB that just they refuse to spend money on players because they just get their automatic payments. Strong talent development pipeline. So integration of sports in high school and collegiate systems. Lot of people playing sports. A lot of eyeballs watching those kids play sports. So there is a huge, robust talent pipeline. Young athletes can develop their skills without sacrificing their education. Draft system that the American system has ensures weaker teams can access that top talent. So the worst teams generally wind up with the best picks in those drafts. Promoting competitive balance across the leagues. Fan engagement and experience, another big strength. We talked a little bit about that. American sports leagues focus heavily on the enhanced fan experiences. They blend sports with entertainment. Super Bowl halftime show, that is an annual event. Everybody is excited. It gets announced in, I don't know, May. Who's going to be doing that? It's probably known next year who they're going to have doing that halftime show. And now they have halftime shows for just about every single sporting event in America. So that has become big entertainment. Got to keep people in the seats and entertained. Stability, market predictability.
That's the big one, right?
That's the one everybody wants to own a franchise because it consistently produces that profit, gives you that money back. Ensures that franchises are not at risk of relegation, giving team owners that significant financial stability. Teams can build those strong brand identities over time, contributing to that consistent revenue generation. Innovative marketing and global expansion. U.S. leagues tapped out here in the U.S. They're looking to go worldwide. NBA is a prime example of that, looking to expand into international markets, particularly Europe and China, demonstrate their commitment to global fan base growth. You've also seen that with the NFL, so lots of expansion.
Spuds hosts a couple
Eric,
games every year
yeah,
in the NFL.
and that is a facet, guys. Go watch that stadium get transformed. It is the coolest thing when they do that. Look at that
It
at
still
YouTube.
looks like a toilet.
I know, but it's still really cool how they do that. What are the strengths of the European sports model?
Well, so promotion and relegation is a big one. So this pyramid structure in European leagues where teams get promoted or relegated means it's a very dynamic competition and it fosters this merit-based system where if you do well, you get promoted. If you continue to do well, you make more money, you know. So if you're
Mhm.
not doing the right things, you talked about Pittsburgh, then you don't, you get relegated and then you
Mhm.
suffer. So lower ranked teams, smaller teams can rise through the ranks, compete at higher levels. There's this grassroots community connection and the teams are there, they've been there, they'll stay there as long as we get into situations where, you know, they uh, continue to get better and better, you know, then they'll continue to grow. And a good one is Wrexham, looking at that, how they're moving up through the system, and everybody gets to watch that. But they develop their own young talent through these local academies, And a lot of them come up right from their town into that academy, into the top leagues in the country. So you look at Marcus Rashford, grew up a stone's throw from Emil Smith Rowe, grew up a stone's throw from,
Mm.
played for those teams. Multiple competitive opportunities. So in the US, you just play the teams in your league for the most part. There's multiple competitions. So there's your domestic league. You've got domestic cups, regional cups, continental tournaments, and it's a lot of opportunities for players in the clubs to win titles, to grow their fan base. It's automatic. You have fans from other countries around Europe or around the world automatically because they like those mixed competitions. Players can decide where they want to go. You can't just trade a player. They have to want to go there. So some teams it's easy, some teams it's hard to draw players. You may have to pay them more money to come to play for you. And then the global popularity, football's been around for a long time and it is the number one sport in the world. So having that appeal across continents, it really means that you get significant international sponsorship and broadcasting revenue that teams like, sports like the NFL, football, they won't necessarily get that. They get a lot of domestic, which is why they want to go out and get all those viewers around the world. That already happens and has been happening in these European leagues.
So what are the weaknesses? Weaknesses of the American sports model. So this lack of promotion and relegation, in my mind, it creates this closed league. And of course, teams that are not performing well in a given year, they can throw up their hands and just continue to play worse. They can trade away their best players for uh, future draft picks, future capital, and they can just be the absolute worst team. In fact, there's a lot of professional teams take that approach. They just be the absolute worst so that they can get all this draft capital, etc., and then they can build themselves into to be winners. Some would say over commercialization. American sports highly profitable. Focus on revenue generation can be a little bit overshadowing of the game itself. Advertising everywhere you can possibly see. They're now putting it on uniforms. In-game entertainment can dilute that sporting experience for people who prioritize the sport over the spectacle. Franchises can be relocated quickly, so there's not that as strong a tie as there are in European sports. We've seen this happen a bunch of times here in the States. Cleveland moves to Baltimore. Baltimore moved to Indianapolis. You always have owners of these big franchises that threaten, well, if you don't build me a bigger stadium, a better stadium, then I'm just going to leave because this town over here, they're offering me all kinds of deals and I'll just pick up my franchise and go. And that can be disheartening for a fan base. Limited international appeal. American sports leagues hugely successful here. Their global footprint is a bit limited compared to let's say European football. NFL, MLB, not as widely followed outside the US, maybe Japan, because there are Japanese leagues, there's South Korea for the MLB, but widely not as successful, restricts their global influence and revenue potential. There are player movement restrictions. These draft and salary cap systems are put in place so that you have your player for a long time. Compared to systems more business driven, less player friendly. So, what are the weaknesses of the European sports model?
Well, you talked a little bit about the financial implications of the stability in the American system, and there's definitely an imbalance in the European system. So the promotion and relegation means that it fosters competition, but you could have really big disparities between teams like Forest, for example, who are coming up, and maybe Man United, who's one of the wealthiest teams in the world. So the richer clubs dominate, creating these super clubs that have access to massive resources, while smaller clubs struggle to compete, struggle to sustain themselves financially, and the cost of player transactions has an effect on that. And that's the second thing, market inflation for players. So they don't have salary caps, which means there are really high transfer fees, really high player wages, which only those really wealthy clubs can afford. So that further widens the gap between these big elite clubs, Arsenal being one of them, and some of the smaller clubs that, they just can't achieve that balance. And really one of the things that I think of when I see this between these two financial imbalances, when we talk about PSR, is Newcastle and how they have money on money on money, but they can't spend it because they'll be breaking PSR rules.
Hmm.
That's one of the weaknesses. Over reliance on a few leagues. So there's really five leagues. You've got Premier League, La Liga, Bundesliga, uh, the Serie A in Italy, and Ligue 1 in France. Those are the big five that they talk about. And everything else under that has less attention, less viewership, less revenue. And it's this top heavy system where really the biggest clubs in those five leagues can buy whatever player they want from the other leagues, and it doesn't go in the reverse direction. There's a
Hmm.
lot of complexity in trying to figure out schedules. So you have all of your domestic leagues, then you have your domestic cups, then you have your international tournaments. One of my aunt's boyfriends does not understand how all this works. He's a huge fan of MLB, Phillies fan, and he just doesn't get it. And I can't explain it. I can't explain it to him, and he just doesn't get it at all. So we talk about in our last episode player fatigue, right? So some guys get hurt
Hmm.
and then they're out. Then that means you have to play the other players more and they lose their health because there's just so many games, so many competitions, and you only have so many players. So there does tend to be a little bit of a slower adoption rate for new technologies. If the NFL wants to do a specific type of camera angle or replay, or, develop a new rule, they just decide it, they vote, they do it, it's done. They spend the money, they fix it. In Europe, it's not like that. It's slower to adopt these technologies compared to American leagues. And then these sort of tech-driven fan experiences, they're not used to it. And so in Europe, it lags behind and it frustrates European fans. So looking at that, closed versus pyramid, sort of more open league structure, player trades and transfers, autonomy or lack of autonomy, fan experience, it is entertainment, but is it too much, or should there be more of a focus on the game? And then you've got all the things surrounding commercialization and revenue generation. So let's dig out around that. What do you want to start with?
Well, I'd like to dig into the revenue generation and commercialization aspect of this because I think that's the root for all of this, for the big difference. Here in the US, there is this guarantee. If you own a club, you own a franchise, you are essentially buying something that is guaranteed to generate X amount of revenue every year over year. It's very stable. It's something that you can count on.
And probably as long as the league is run well, it's going to increase every year because viewership will go up, or the cost of sponsorships will continue to rise.
No matter what you do, if you win, you're going to get the same amount as if you lose. So you have some owners in certain leagues that are there just to own that club as solely as a straight up investment. They're not there for sporting purposes to win, which as fans, you want your owner to want to win.
That frustrates me to no end in American sports, and it's mostly why I don't watch American sports anymore. I have my favorite teams in each of the leagues here that I watch,
Mhm.
or at least, I look at what they're doing each year, but I don't really watch a lot of their games. I watch hockey less than I
Hmm.
used to. I don't really watch a lot of NFL. I don't watch any NBA. I don't watch any NASCAR. I don't watch, baseball just bores me to death. I know that frustrates you, but like the thing is these teams they just really they don't invest. And you got the Pittsburgh Pirates and you got the Kansas City Royals, and they just stink year after year after year. Or you've got teams like the Tampa Bay Rays or the Tampa Bay Lightning, where they'll win a title and sell off their whole team for money.
Yeah, that was the Miami teams, the baseball team. That was their. They've gone through so many changes. Miami Marlins, I think, is the
Yeah.
name.
Is that what it was? Miami,
Yeah,
not Tampa Bay.
maybe it was Florida Marlins. So they've gone through a lot of iterations as a team, but they will build up, build up, build up, win a World Series, and then they sell everybody, sell all their players off to trade them,
Trade, yeah.
let them go, whatever the case is, drive that cost down because that's a cost to them, player salaries. And then they start to build that back from square one. And they do that, and they were fairly successful with that approach. They'd win a couple of World Series. So there is some sportingness to that, but you don't like it because as a fan of that team, you want to see them keep the players. You
Why
want
wouldn't
to
they
see
win
them
back to
keep.
back or back to back to back? It's not easy and it hasn't been done very often. But if you've got a team that can win a World Series this year, why can't you win a World Series next year? I don't know.
Exactly.
For me, one of the frustrating things about commercialization is the ability to move franchises. And so Mark
Mm.
Cuban, one of the most, you know, popular or famous billionaires in the US, bought the Dallas
Mavericks at the time.
Mavericks. Thank you. I
Okay.
couldn't think of what their name
Hmm.
was. Um, Years and years ago for like 400 million, less than 400 million. And he just sold a majority stake. He only owns about a quarter of it now for like 3.5 or more billion. So he made tons of money. That's why he's a multi-billion. He just made over 3 billion on that deal. So the owner of that team now, she wants to move. She either wants Dallas to build the city of Dallas and this, the state, the county, whatever, to build her a new stadium, a new arena, or she wants to move the team to Las Vegas. And it's about money. I don't want to spend the money for a stadium. The Cowboys, by the way, spent the money for their own stadium. I'm sure they got subsidized a little bit, but most of it was them. And since they wouldn't do it, she threw her toys out of the pram, as they say in England, and she forced a trade. Their best player and one of the best players in the league got traded to Los Angeles,
Los Angeles, the Lakers.
right? And they got a guy who's older, also good, but older. So, they lose a 22-year-old guy to get a 26 or 28-year-old guy. And basically it's like, well, you know what? If I don't get what I want, then Dallas fans, you can blame the city for your best player being gone. And I don't like that, and I don't know, maybe the first time that's ever been done, but
I
wow.
I can't remember seeing that ever done before, but yes, it is. It was quite the radical move and really emphasizes the bond between the fans of a team and that team. How can you develop those strong bonds if that team can just go away the next day? You know that I'm a Pittsburgh Pirate fan and have been for as long as I've been alive, and that is a difficult experience. It is different than the experience of being an Arsenal fan. I can tell you that. The Pittsburgh, they don't necessarily want to win. They always claim that they don't have the funds to compete with the big
It
boys.
is a really small market, to be
Yeah,
fair.
but you also have St. Louis. That also is a small market, but they do their fair share of winning and winning World Series and spending. So I don't buy that it's a small market kind of stuff. They have the money to spend it. They just refuse to do so. and they refuse to put that money into the team. Pittsburgh has a beautiful baseball stadium. It is beautiful, Eric. I don't know if you've ever been there, but if you
It's
do get the
baseball, Matt. I
chance,
don't do
I
baseball.
get it. I get it. Gosh, it's gorgeous. It's absolutely gorgeous. One of the best, I think it's voted one of the best stadiums in America. But their lease will be up in 5 or 6 years, and the owner will start making demands to improve that stadium, or he'll just bolt.
Maybe it would be better if
Is
they
that
just
happening?
bolted.
No, if that happens, I will just stop watching baseball altogether, I think.
So this whole thing about um, fan experience for me and commercialization and revenue generation, what I love about football, Arsenal, the Premier League, any of the European leagues is that you watch the game and you only have to watch the game. When you're watching the Super Bowl, when you're watching any American sport, they have breaks in the middle of the game where there's no need
Mhm.
to have a break just because they're literally commercializing by running commercials and it's ridiculous. And it's the reason I can't watch baseball because it's so slow. And people will say, but they only score one goal in a soccer game. And my response is you can have baseball games that are a 1-0 baseball game. They're not often, but it happens. Hockey 1-0, football can be 7-0 or 3-0, which is one score.
Sure.
So you can have those. They're not often, but they do happen. The hardest thing to do in sports, some people say, is to hit a baseball. Other people say it's to score a goal in soccer.
How rare it is. Yes, scoring a goal in soccer is one of the best things. And, when you talk about fan experience, I hate to bring in VAR and video replay. So it's something that's in common in both leagues. They kind of delay that fan gratification, I suppose, in seeing that play happen and celebrating that play. And then you have to wait to make
Well,
sure that it actually happened in accordance with all of the rules. And you're depending on video eyes and different eyeballs and all the bias that
and
goes in
and I
with it.
don't know which is better, but if you're watching NFL football and they're doing a replay, trying to make a decision about that, they'll show a couple of replays. But if it looks like it's going to be a while, they'll go to commercial, come back, and they'll show you what happened.
Fair.
And it might be 2 minutes or whatever because they've got these commercials to run to make money. I don't know that I want commercials to come in to to these leagues to try to figure out soccer, what's going on with that replay, what's going on with that offsides call, what's going on with that red card, is it or isn't it? I don't think I want that.
Yeah, with soccer, I want them to play. The focus of the game is on the game. You want to watch them play. You want to continue playing. Make your decision, move on. That needs to improve.
I want to put a couple of political terms on these two types of systems, and I don't want it to be political when I say it like this, but I think when you talk about a free market system, the closest thing to a free market sports system is global football. You have to spend the money to get the best players. You get the best players, you win your league, you get promoted, you buy the best players, keep the best players, have the best coach, win that league, get promoted. And we're seeing this in Wrexham right now, how they're doing it. And they're getting global promotions. They're having TV things in the US, has nothing to do with being in Wales. They're
Yep.
promoting this all over the world, and people all over the world are watching it, and they're getting eyeballs, and the eyeballs mean money. And so when they get to the Premier League, they'll have all the things they need, including all the money. That is free market. You could never do that. You could not buy a AAA baseball team in the United States and ever get out of the AAA.
That is correct. You can't grow them. You can never get out of the AAA. You are stuck there. You are capped there. And I'd imagine for some of those franchises that is frustrating, limiting, because they're run well. Some of these AAA franchises are run really, really well.
And most of these franchises are owned, or at least the players from the major league teams play for those teams. And
Yeah,
it just
they're feeder teams for the major league.
there's no benefit to being in those leagues except that you get people looking at you so that maybe you get traded to a major league team or you go from AAA to AA as a player, but it has nothing to do with the franchises. It has to do with keeping players active so that you have a pool of candidates to come up because they bring these players in from high school, some of them, and they bring some of them in right after college or in the middle of college. They don't finish and they just sit in the minors until they're ready, till they're 22 or 23. It takes a little longer to develop and then they finally come in. So I don't know. If I have to pick, I feel like American sports leagues are a little bit socialist in the regard that they're so limited by the governing organization in terms of what you can and can't do, how you can and can't spend in a lot of cases, who you can and can't trade. In the NBA, I can't trade you my best player for your best player unless the salaries are equal. And if my best player makes three times the money, you have to trade me players so that the salary exchange is
Hmm.
equal.
Hmm.
Why? Why? I don't want three players for one. I just want your one player.
Well, you got to balance the books somehow.
Yeah, that's your responsibility to balance your books. If I trade you a player who makes three times the money and you want him, you got to balance your books. You just cut the other two players. I'm not responsible for their contracts. But the NBA says that I have to be, and I don't like
Those
that.
are your rules. Yes,
Right. You know,
there are
and
rules
in
of
these
yeah.
European football leagues, you don't have that. If I want to buy your best player, I have to be able to pay him probably more than you're paying him. Plus, I have to pay you a fee that satisfies you to be willing to give him up. And this is why we don't have Arsenal being we, Benjamin Sesko.
You bet.
He
The
wanted to stay. We didn't offer enough money for him or the team, Leipzig, to want to sell him. But the opportunity was there. And that's really what the important thing is. Everybody could have decided yes.
they could have, but they certainly didn't. And of course, talks continue with said player.
So my preference, Matt, is 100%. I like the European model. And I think that they're trending in the ways that the American model generates income. I think they're finding a balance where they can generate the income without overblowing the commercialization.
But you have also seen in European soccer that there is this movement afoot to try to create this super league. And that super league, the terms of being in that super league are essentially there will never be a promotion relegation aspect to that super league, how it was discussed a year ago, or maybe it was a couple years at this point. It's a set number of teams, it's 18 teams, and it will be these clubs because they're the biggest. And all of a sudden, you have this stale, stagnant kind of competition. You no longer have people, teams wanting to play, wanting to win, fighting in those relegation sort of scraps that it's really about money, those relegation scraps. You want to stay in the league, you got to win.
Yeah, I think one of my favorite things to say is I don't solve problems I don't have.
Mm.
And that's not a problem we have because they haven't formed that league, number one. And Arsenal have said they're not going to join that league if it does form. So I don't know if that's true. Things change. We have an American owner. He owns lots and lots and lots of American teams in the American model. So who knows what's going to happen, but it's a problem we don't have. So I don't have to try to think about how solving that problem just means what do I do emotionally? How do I react? And I don't have to. So
And the thing that I just absolutely love about the European model is promotion relegation. It makes every single game matter. There is no there are no games that don't matter. Everything is important.
I like the opportunity to win more than one trophy. or more than one opportunity to win a trophy
Hmm.
every year. Unless you're Spurs, then you can't win
Ever,
ever.
ever, ever, ever. We are seeing some of that here in the US, and we talked a little bit about that earlier, how the NBA is starting to have these in-season cups and competitions. It's not something that has caught on very well here in the US, but they are doing it year on year.
It's because people don't understand it yet, but I think once it becomes a little more normal and normalized, and if it works, then I think maybe and in the MLS they have the cups where they play between the MLS and Liga X in Mexico. Those teams play all together in a single competition. I forget what they call it, but
It's their version of a Champions League.
sort of, yeah. And so that's fun, and I would like to see, the potential for uh, interleague play in other sports. But where are they going to? I mean, do they play against Japan? Do they play against South American teams for baseball? Do they bring in some European teams to play against the NBA? There's not really other American football leagues that would compete well.
Yeah, that travel, the distance that you have to travel, I think, is what hinders that.
But you have the what you call it, World Cup, the Club World Cup, and they
Oh,
do
that,
they do it, right?
yeah,
So
they do.
it's, you play
They bring
teams
it all
from Asia,
together.
you play teams from South America, and so I mean it could be done.
Could be.
So your preference?
Oh, my preference is the European model solely because it's merit based.
Yeah.
You win, you go, you move on, you lose, you get demoted. And that's how it should be. There's motivation owners to develop those kind of systems that will allow them to win, to get to raise the stakes
And
of their franchise.
and to be fair, if the Pirates got relegated, you would still root for them
Oh, you bet.
as a double A team?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
And they probably would
they'd be
they
down to the single A at this
no, I think they wouldn't. I think they'd be
point.
one of those teams that yo-yos.
No, they would never yo-yo. That means they would have to be good in a league. And I don't know that I could ever see them being good in any league. And it is frustrating and disappointing.
Well, this was interesting. This went a lot longer than I thought it would. So, good topic.
Yeah, that
Thanks,
was
Matt.
fun. That was fun. Thanks. That was yeah.
Thanks, Matt.
Thank you. Well, thanks everyone for tuning in to Stateside Gooners Arsenal FC show. Every episode, we bring American Gooners together to dive into the emotions, the tactics, and all the action on and off the pitch. If you enjoyed the show, don't forget to subscribe, share it with your fellow Gooners to keep the Arsenal conversation going. Until next time, from across the pond, this is where our Arsenal community meets: win, lose, draw. We'll catch you next time. Thanks for listening.
Thanks, everybody.
And yes, just to finish that thought, we
No,
lost
we're gonna record it over.
13. Oh, we are? Okay.
Yeah, no, because I mean, I knew you wanted to say something, and I kind of was like, all so start over.
All right, where were we? Do you want to do just interim?
No, you just want to do. We just
You just
want to
want
do.
me to do
Yep.
my?
Just ask me. Did you ever lose by 13, 12 goals,
You ever,
whatever?
did you ever lose by 12 goals? Eric,
Matt,
you ever lose a game that much?
I think it was. I think it was once. I think in high school we lost to Williams Williamsport
Oof.
13-1, and Rick is proud of the 13-1 because he scored the one, and they were so much
You-
better than us. So I think we did once lose by 12. How about you?
Yes, I have, oddly enough, lost 13-1 as well. One time, cold night in Lock Haven, Pennsylvania. Awful. Millville.
Oh, well,
Scrappy.
of course.
Scrappy, of course, he had a couple of goals against us that particular night. He swears he doesn't remember it, but I do. What an
Well,
awful,
it's just another game that they
awful
won by
night.
a buttload of goals. Man, I can't speak right now. What is going on?
Yep. So I've lost by 12 goals before, and it's a terrible, terrible thing to be out there.
Yeah, I didn't like it. It was the middle of the day. It wasn't cold. It was sunny, you
Oh,
know.
for us, it was nighttime. It was cold. It was cold. That's all I remember.
Yep.
And my buddy, my buddy has a penalty kick, and he shot it over the goal, and the ball must have rolled. It rolled through the McDonald's parking lot. It
Oh
rolled into the
no.
main street of Lock Haven, Belfont. I think it wound up in Dunkin' Donuts. Oh well.
All right. Well, it was good to see you.
Yep.
Got an episode
Great
coming up
seeing
again
you.
real soon. Real soon.
Yeah, we'll be
Surprisingly
back with
soon.
you soon. Yeah,
All right.
oddly enough.
All right. Hopefully with that little pause.
Yeah, I was gonna say, how long do you want to pause?
Nope. Just like that.
Okay, good
Because I
enough.
just paused the recording itself, so I don't know if that shows up.